Raise some.
Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.
Welcome, Patriots, to another edition of the Raising Cain Show. Tonight, we've got a great conversation that we're going to be getting into. We're going to be talking about naval warfare and what has been changing and what we are seeing based out of this Iran war. And to help me do that, I'm bringing on Captain Sullivan, Bill Sullivan, retired. He is a distinguished 25-year career veteran with the surface warfare officer in the United States Navy. It's going to be a great conversation tonight. So, like you know, as I always do, we go into our commercial break to get that out of the way so that way we don't have any interruptions during our conversation. So I'm going to do that now. Stay with us. We will be right back after a short break.
Heard of Q Broadcast? It's taking the world by storm. People are cutting the cord to their high cable bills and moving away from streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and others for something better. Q Broadcast. For just $60 a month, you'll get access to every channel you could ever want, including HBO, Cinemax, and Stars. And the best part? There are no contracts, no hidden fees, and you're free to cancel anytime. With Q Broadcast, you can enjoy streaming live TV, movies, and top series on up to 5 devices at once. Whether you're at home or on the go, Q Broadcast makes sure your entertainment is always at your fingertips. Imagine being able to watch all your favorite channels from anywhere, anytime, without any restrictions. We're talking about thousands of movies, hundreds of TV series, and a huge library of live channels, all in one place. And don't forget video on demand and pay-per-view events. Those are included at no extra cost, so you'll never miss a big event again. Now, take a second and think about your current cable bill. You're probably paying anywhere between $100 and $300 every month, locked into long-term contracts and hit with surprise rate increases. With Q Broadcast, that's a thing of the past. It's just $60 a month. No contracts, no extra fees, no hidden costs, and no price hikes. Why juggle multiple subscriptions like Netflix, Hulu, and cable when Q Broadcast gives you everything you need in one convenient package? People everywhere are switching to Q Broadcast, saving money and getting more content than ever before. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description and sign up for Q Broadcast today. Just $60 a month, no contracts, no hidden fees. It's time to take control of your entertainment and start streaming smarter.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's edition of the Raising Cain Show. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our distinguished guest, Captain Retired Bill Sullivan. Captain Sullivan completed a distinguished 25-year career of active and reserve service as a surface warfare officer in the United States Navy, retiring in 2021. His operational experience spans both the tactical and operational levels of war. He served in the Arabian or Persian Gulf, where he participated in combat operations against Iraq, enforced international sanctions at sea, and led multinational maritime exercises with Gulf nations. Later in his career, he focused on deterring and responding to aggression in the Western Pacific Ocean. His command tours included critical mission sets centered on maritime security, the protection of commercial shipping, and planning of major combat operations. And that is why I'm really excited to have you on tonight, because there's so much going on right now related to the protection of shipping lanes. And this is what I really want to get into tonight with you and your background. I think you'll be able to provide us some great insights. But thank you so much for joining the show.
Sure. Thanks, Nate. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah. So there is a lot happening right now. Just today, there was some breaking news that the Houthis are stepping up into this to fight on behalf of Iran as their proxy. They're making threats, and of course, this adds a level of complexity to the things, because now instead of just paying attention to the Straits of Hormuz, we're now also looking at the Red Sea, and in that inflection point right there where Yemen is basically right at the opening of the Red Sea. And we know from the past they've had no problem firing missiles on civilian ships and on American ships. And so I kind of want to start there tonight. What is your assessment of how this changes things? And do you see, if you were to and I know we're this is just pure speculation here, but if you were to look at the circumstances now, and we've got 2 expeditionary units that I think one of them may already be there and one is now still on its way. You've got the Airborne Rangers, 82nd Airborne, I think, is in the region now, has come into the region. I think they might be in Jordan or that area. But give me your assessment of the added complexity of this. Why now, when they've seen the total destruction, of the IRGC and of Hezbollah and of Hamas? What in the world would ever motivate them to decide to come against the power of the United States and Israel?
Right. Yeah, well, we're talking about the Houthis here in this case,
Yeah.
and kind of opening up a second front in the Red Sea and the choke point there, the Bab el-Mandeb, strait, just 15, 20 miles across, one of the world's maritime choke points. And so, I mean, my first thought is this is expected. It was expected. Iran's the largest exporter of terror in the world, and the Houthi rebels are really nothing more than a terrorist group. It's been harassing, neutral shipping for no reason here for better part of a year and a half, and so maybe longer. And so this is to be expected. I think over that couple years that we were dealing with the Houthi rebel issue in the Red Sea, we likely significantly degraded their capabilities. We had a naval blockade of some sort. We were stopping some of the flow of arms into Yemen, and destroying certainly the fixed and probably a lot of the mobile anti-cruise ship, anti-ship cruise missile sites, leaving them, reducing them to using drones and mobile anti-ship cruise missile platforms. So I think that the Houthi issue doesn't change things that much. I think that the Red Sea is something to watch. I'm sorry, the Strait of Suez Canal is also something to watch, right? Like that's even narrower and even longer than these straits. And if there was some act of terrorism, some issue that caused a ship to be scuttled or sink right there in the Suez Canal, I mean, that could be even a further disruption, kind of opening like a third front in the naval operation.
That's a very good point. I want to bring up for folks that are watching just a map of the area so that I can show what I'm talking about here. Give me one moment. I'm going to bring this up. Google Earth. So as you guys can see, right here is this is what everybody's been talking about, the Straits of Hormuz. And so one of the things that's kind of interesting is, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I had read today, or maybe it was last night, that the IRGC has opened a toll booth. I think it's on this island. Am I correct in that?
I can't see your screen. I just brought up Google Earth myself. I can't see your screen, but yeah,
Hold on one second. Let me add that to the stage. There we go. That helps. So yeah, so what I'm talking about here is this. There's this island that that is here, and I'm thinking that toll booth has got to be around here because they're talking about that the IRGC has created some sort of toll booth where nations that are friendly to them or whatever can pass without the threat of any kind of action by them. Are you? What can you tell me about this, and what does that even mean, or what does that even look like?
Right. Well, I mean, a few things about it. One is it's outside of it's outside of international waters. It's actually in Iranian territorial waters. So, from a legal standpoint, they have all they're afforded all the ability to enforce their laws, and basically do what they want inside their territorial waters. Whereas the normal shipping lanes go right through the middle of the strait, and it's just like a freeway with inbound lanes and outbound lanes, and a separation zone sometimes in the middle, and a couple miles wide, plenty of room for ships to pass. And that's considered to be international waters because it's shared by many nations. This route this toll booth route that you're describing there, off the northeast end of Keshem Island, and next to that small island that I'm forgetting the name. It's actually a very simple name, but that toll booth route is diverting white shipping, neutral shipping, commercial shipping, into territorial waters where they then inspect and then give them the, go, no go. I don't think they're collecting a toll. I think that I know of. I think that the Iranians are just allowing passage to friendly nations so that they can maintain some of their standing in the world without peeving off, again, the Chinese and Indians and others that would, could end up joining the U.S. As the president was suggesting, perhaps in reopening the strait. Well, Iran's kind of lifted a safety valve and allowed some of this pressure release to go through for these other nations, taking some of the pressure then off of Iran.
Now, there's been a lot of talk about another island, and that is this island right here, Kerg. And what can you tell us about this? Why is this such an important strategic location? And there's been a lot of talk. My understanding is this is a major pipeline hub for the oil that's coming out of there. But what challenges right now do we have in even being able to get to this area?
Yeah. So that's up in the North Arabian Gulf. Notice how I'll refer to this just as a sidebar as the Arabian Gulf. That's just something anybody in the naval profession will do, or probably the military, as opposed to the Persian Gulf, right? Because for decades we have aligned ourselves with the Gulf cooperation companies, the Sunni Muslim nations that on the Arabian Peninsula, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, etc. And so we've determined some time ago that we call this the Arabian Gulf instead of the Persian Gulf, because if you call it the Persian Gulf, then it lends some ownership to the Persians, the Iranians. And so the Arabian Gulf, north part of the Arabian Gulf, this is very shallow water. These super tankers are going to draw, loaded, 40, 45 feet, possibly a little bit more at times. And so they have a hard time getting into shore. Iran doesn't have any significant deep water ports. And so this island is important to them because it's outside of that choke point shipping lane. So outside of all that major traffic zone, but it gives them an opportunity to load crude oil onto tankers, essentially in a deep water setting, as opposed to closer to shore. So a lot of the Iranian oil fields, pump their oil to this facility, and that's kind of how that came to be.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, looking at this and just kind of backing out on this here, obviously, this is an important choke point for most of well, I wouldn't say most, because I think Saudi Arabia wisely built a pipeline to bypass the Straits of Hormuz. And so I think now the majority of their oil, at least, does not flow or does not have to get loaded on boats here. But you still have a lot of the other Gulf states that are very dependent upon the ability to be able to ship their oil out of here. What can you tell me about? Is there do you have any information on some of the other concerns that they have coming around here. My understanding is that some of these other islands are also controlled by Iran.
Well, yes. I mean, like any waterway, you're going to have, certainly within 12 nautical miles, any of any land is going to be territorial waters unless that overlaps with another nation's 12-mile claim, in which case it becomes under maritime law, it becomes an international strait, and any nation can transit that. So some of these islands then that are kind of out in the middle of the Gulf are, they have historic claims, by Iran. I believe there's a few other of them that are claimed by some of the GCC nations. But yeah, I mean, to your point about that oil pipeline, I don't know who all's putting oil in there. It's in the UAE. It's on the other side. It's on the Arabian Sea side in a place called Fujairah. And if you look on websites like Maritime Traffic that shows all the locations of commercial shipping around the world based on their self-reported squawk of the automated information system, which is kind of required, but in times of war, they tend to turn that off or spoof it. But nonetheless, you'll notice that there's a huge anchorage out there. And a lot of people think those are ships waiting to get into the Gulf. To a great extent, those are ships waiting to load oil at Port of Fujairah.
Now there's of course, this is no longer the only hot spot of concern. It's now also with the Houthis getting involved. We've got another area, a choke point, if you will, and that's this area just down here. You've got Djibouti to the south, and was that Eritrea, I think? And then up here is Yemen, and this is where the Houthis are, up in this area. Now, there's already been multiple, just in the last couple of years, there have been multiple attacks on ships. There have been rockets fired on commercial vessels as well as on American ships that are transiting this area, American Navy ships. What can you tell me about the threats that are here, and are we likely to see the same type of situation with Lloyd's of London pulling insurance from any ships that transit this area? Because it's bad enough that that they're doing that here. That affects all the maritime traffic through this area. But if they do the same thing here, that's significant, because then you're talking about ships having to go all the way around the bottom of Africa and up in order to be able to transit, rather than going through the canal here.
Right. So but that condition, should it manifest, is really no different than we've endured over the past 2 years. I'm forgetting exactly how long the Houthis have been. Houthis have been active against Saudi Arabia, our ally in the region, for some time. 10 years. But they have not been. Occasionally, they would target a commercial ship. They would, maybe if it was a suspected Saudi ship or something of that nature, but not until Israel took action against Gaza, and then the Houthis, in protest of that, have started targeting commercial shipping as it transits to the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb and in the Red Sea there. And so, but we've endured that for a couple of years. There's been dozens and dozens of ships struck by anti-ship cruise missiles, drones, either aerial drones or also sea drones. And then, as you probably know, a number of ships have been hijacked, boarded, including, I believe, one or two situations where they actually boarded like a tanker using a helo and fast ropes and all that high-speed stuff. So this has been going on for a while. The U.S. has been had at least one destroyer present there for quite some time to try to swat down these missiles. A number of U.S. ships have been targeted by cruise missiles, and there have been a number of engagements. So for the first time since we entered the guided missile element of era of naval warfare, we have started shooting down missiles. This is something that we would, maybe do a few times over the course of a couple of years in practice, so to speak. But, U.S. Navy was out there, these destroyers were out there executing this mission on a near daily basis over the past few years. I forget how many missiles we've shot down, but it's on the order of hundreds.
Yeah. It's
And
amazing.
so again, about the threat, that's kind of what we were talking about at the beginning. I mean, to me, I look at this and I go, well, how is this a change from the background? How is it potentially, it's opening a new front, sure. This is an Iranian proxy. They've been an Iranian proxy. We've degraded their capability, over the past 2 years, which is why you don't hear much about this any longer. We could certainly implement a naval blockade of Yemen and make sure that they're not reinforced. Also, the Iranians are going to have a difficult time getting any ships underway from Iran, smuggling missiles and drones to Yemen at this point anyway. So I think this is probably what I would call like a nuisance threat, and not to minimize any threat, but we do have to be realistic about the magnitude of threats and try to prioritize those accordingly. And a rogue drone threat in the Red Sea from the Houthis, occasional, that's not much of a change from background conditions of the past couple of years. That, by the way, Lloyd's did not, and we always say Lloyd's because they are the underwriters for most insurance for shipping, but the insurers did not raise rates. The insurance did not cancel voyages. By and large, again, it's not that much of a difference.
Right. Now, I'm just looking at here, just some of the statistics. So we, in all, it looks like we have had, we've dropped quite a bit of ordnance on Iran, and of course, it's all on very specific targets. But it looks like by early March, within roughly the first 10 days. We had struck more than 5,000 targets, and the latest updates that we've hit over 8,000 Iranian military targets. With that said, I mean, how many aircraft carriers do we have in the area right now?
Well, we have 2,
Okay.
but the USG has been a little cagey on the status of the Gerald R. Ford strike group and Gerald R. Ford aircraft carriers specifically. And it sounds like by cagey meaning that, I mean, in times of conflict, and certainly with military issues, they're not going to, put all the details out on the table, right?
Sure.
Major movements, things the public needs to know, great. But, I think that the American public has to accept that for operational security and for the safety of our sailors and Marines, airmen, Coast Guardsmen, et cetera, at sea, we cannot, we should not expect the U.S. government to disclose every move that they're going to make. But I've heard the Gerald R. Ford's coming home. It's been underway for a year, set a record for the longest deployment. They've had all kinds of problems. Brand new ship, maiden voyage. This is bound to happen, by the way, with any new ship, new class. And certainly it has. They've had sewage issues, degraded quality of life for the sailors. They had a reported laundry room fire that, again, USG was slow to release this information, and we'll find out when everybody gets back exactly what happened. But this fire burnt apparently for something like 3 days or 30 hours.
That's a very dangerous thing on a ship.
Fire is absolutely dangerous on a ship, and so it's hard to imagine how a laundry fire could cause so much damage that it took 30 hours to put the fire out, and that it displaced a reported 600 sailors from the berthing, or 1/10 of the crew. So 10% of the crew does not have their berthing spaces, so they're sleeping in the hangar bay, mess decks, gym, whatever.
Wow.
In probably pretty austere conditions in a very active, loud working environment. I mean, it's got to be just very tough conditions. Think about these guys on the aviation boatswain mates and ordnance men, and these guys that are working the flight deck, one of the most hazardous working environments in the world. And they're out there doing flight quarters, launch and recovery, wave after wave after wave, live ammunition. And they're out there in the middle of the night working. It's dirty. They have, limited, and then now they have to go down and sleep in the hangar bay where they're doing maintenance with pneumatic tools all night. I mean, it's just, they must be going through a lot. So for the sake of morale, safety, my opinion, and they need to get that aircraft carrier back to Norfolk as soon as possible. Get the other one to come out and relieve it. And I forget exactly which the other one is. If it was.
So with these Marine Expeditionary Units, they've got like I said, I think two of them are coming into the area. They have their own little, like, they call like a mini aircraft carrier. But what is the main difference between what they are on, the platform they're on, versus, like, our main carriers? Explain that, and if you wouldn't mind, how is their mission different? What is their primary mission?
Yeah. So our aircraft carriers, their primary mission is to project power ashore, through naval aviation. So essentially to bring ordnance ashore, period. And so all the aircraft, 90 some odd aircraft on there, support that mission one way or the other. There's a secondary mission that an aircraft carrier strike group and all the ships around it would perform, and that is maritime naval combat at sea. But again, that does not appear to be exercised in this current conflict. So these other ships that are coming, they're amphibious ships. There's an LHA, for example, the Tripoli is a large deck helicopter and Marine Corps fixed wing. We'll call it kind of like a mini carrier. It's a lot smaller, but still has elevators, still has a flight deck, still has an island. Looks a lot like an aircraft carrier. Doesn't have a catapult. The aircraft that launch out of there are either rotor or they are vertical, or I'm sorry, short takeoff and landing, like F-35 types. So that's Tripoli. Tripoli does not. It's one of the few LHA's helicopter. The H is for helicopter. It does a helicopter assault ship. It does not have a wet well where it can take the LCACs, or the landing craft air cushion landing boats back and forth. It cannot accept these various types of amphibious Amtraks and boats that would go ashore to the beach, deliver Marines over the shore versus by air. So this is strictly a helicopter carrier. And then there's other ships that are in the amphibious readiness group that are transiting with the Marines that are capable of putting Marines onto the beach by water, because they have well decks, or by helicopter. And so these two sets of Marines, or these MEUs, Marine Expeditionary Units, are going to each have a mix of these types of ships.
So just to bring up a picture here for folks that so they can see what this looks like. See if I can pull one up here. All right, here's
to be clear though, Nate, I mean, the mission of these two inbound groups units is amphibious operations.
Yeah. So my understanding is that, like, they play one of the concerns that I've seen some talk about is mines, because they do have the Iranians do have mining capabilities, although I think we've wiped out most of that. But my understanding is that, because I've watched a couple videos, and that's not something that I had really had any kind of knowledge of prior to this war, because I mean, how often is that used? But there are some very sophisticated mines that exist now. My understanding is that the Iranians aren't known for having a whole lot of very sophisticated ones like some of the ones that we have. But how do these mines work? I mean, are these like basically the standard mine that's just under the surface that the hull of the ship hits and it detonates, or are these like more of the advanced mines that will magnetize and stick to the hull and and that sort of thing?
Right. So the naval mines, and obviously Iran has contemplated their ability to close the strait for decades. And so naval mines with respect to Iran and Strait of Hormuz is a very real threat. Interesting side note, we haven't seen it come about yet, but they three different types of mines: contact mines, either the ship hits it and it blows up, or there's a pressure wave when the ship moves through the water, especially if it's shallow water, and so then that can cause a mine to explode. A magnetic mine, so either any magnetic signature, or it could be tuned to a certain magnetic signature, or an acoustic mine. either any sound of an engine or a prop, or a specific sound for a specific platform, that the mine just sits there and waits. And that mines can be moored to the bottom and kind of floating halfway up in the water column. They can be buried in the mud on the bottom, or in many cases they can just be set adrift and float around, which is what we saw a lot in the 1980s during the tanker wars, which is the, really the last application of mines that we've seen. But yeah, so we would expect the Iraqis to, or I'm sorry, the Iranians probably have all of these types of mines.
Yeah. Now we've got a couple of minesweepers, my understanding, at least from what they've told us, in the area, but they can't necessarily just operate, right? Because that's their main focus, is dealing with the mines. And of course, we have some very sophisticated equipment on some of our helicopters that can locate and identify them. But what goes into protecting these minesweepers? Because that's my understanding, is that the big threat is they need to have a protection bubble around them when they're operating. Right. So how does that work?
Most of our naval assets are, very wisely out in the Arabian Sea. So they're not in the, in the combat zone, so to speak. They're not in the Arabian Persian Gulf. They're in the Arabian Sea, out in the blue water, open ocean. And, they can conduct their operations there safely out of the range of a lot of Iranian weapon systems. And that's probably going to continue for the foreseeable future. Somebody had said it once, and I think it's a great point. We might never see an aircraft carrier go into the Persian Gulf again. I mean, you got to ask yourself why. What's the need? We can project power from outside the open ocean. We don't need to go in there. It's shallow. It's dangerous. It's So anyway, but to your question about mine laying. So when they were planning this operation, and of course this is speculation, but it's speculation based on experience, they would have hit the submarines first, and any mine laying capability right off the bat. Like this operation, there's an air component commander, it's a combined joint task force, and so there's a commander of the entire operation, and then the various components. So there's an air commander, there's a ground commander, there's a naval or a maritime commander, and there's some others. And so they work together and they prioritize what the targeting list is going to look like. And, they each get a little bit of a say in what gets targeted and when, and it's a matter of prioritization. You can't hit everything all at once on the first day. And so they hit, I would speculate, and it's logical, they would hit naturally the submarines first. And then they absolutely need to know where those submarines are. And they absolutely need to destroy those right off the bat, because those are what will sink a carrier. And so they haven't come out and mentioned too much about this yet, but you can bet that was very high on their priority list. And then second or equal to that would have been their mine laying capability. And so there's several different ways to lay mines. Certainly you can lay them from ships. You can lay mines from aircraft. My understanding is we achieved air superiority within the first hours of the war, and it's unlikely they would be able to deploy mines by air. So it's what is likely is, and we reported, according to Admiral Cooper, that they took out their mine laying capability, so they're official mine laying boats. But the other thing to worry about that we train for all the time is fishing boats, dhows, coastal freighters, innocent looking boats that go out in the water and just lay mines into the water discreetly and covertly. And so that is probably the greatest threat. And my guess is that they have intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, or ISR, assets constantly up and down that coastline, watching virtually each one of these vessels to make sure they're not engaged in mine laying activities covertly. And then if they are, they would naturally destroy them, neutralize the mines. So we haven't heard anything about mines yet. And I think that's probably because they likely destroyed most of the mine laying capability within the first hours of the war. And, mines just aren't going to be, mines do not appear to be an issue at this point, and probably won't be.
So this is something that has, I'm really curious from your perspective. Obviously, you've probably been in multiple war games. You've done a lot of training over your career. That's one of the things that the United States military does best, is we train. and I think that's why we are so good at what we do. But I got to be honest with you, I am like a bit surprised at just how successful that we have been in, several operations, whether it was the, operation in Venezuela or this operation. It just seems unbelievably well coordinated and well prepared for. And so I don't know if it is that Iran was a bit of a paper tiger, or our capabilities were much better than even what we thought, or a little bit of both. What are your thoughts on that?
From a naval perspective, you're correct. I mean, I think we can assess that it is going quite well. I mean, that's what our government's telling us, and that's what the evidence suggests. We can talk later about the so-called closure of Strait of Hormuz, but and we ought to talk about that because the drone issue is a little bit of a wild card. But but yeah, I mean, we've heard no reports of submarines and no reports of mines. And, thank the Lord, we have not taken any naval casualties because those would be very painful casualties for us to take. And, so their naval air forces are diminished or degraded. The anti-ship cruise missiles, you can bet all the fixed sites for those, and there's many of them. Those would have been destroyed in the first days of the war. They have a number of mobile sites, so those are likely on the targeting list, right? Dynamic targeting, and there's a bird up in there, and they observe a truck rolling out with anti-ship cruise missiles on it, and then they send whatever assets are available to prosecute that target. So we can assume that those things are going on, and even if they're pulling these trucks out of caves and getting them out of warehouses, I would argue they still have to bring them down to the beach and shoot them, right? They can't shoot them from inland anti-ship cruise missiles, and so they're going to have a very hard time deploying those. So you just work your way down all the potential threats, and it starts to get pretty small, from submarines, mines, anti-ship cruise missiles, all the way down to their surface vessels were destroyed. Now we're just really dealing with a lot of small boats. They have many small boats, these bog hammers, and other kind of coastal fast boats that they have. They have for years practiced what they call swarm tactics. This before the time of drones, but they would take and practice, and there's video on the forever on the internet of doing this. They would take U.S. ships, especially carriers, as they transit the Strait of Hormuz. They would send dozens, scores, maybe even hundreds of manned small boats out there to swarm the U.S. carrier and overwhelm. The idea, of course, is to overwhelm our defenses. And if one of those gets through laden with explosives, then you have a situation where they could score a mission kill or maybe even sink a ship.
On that note, when it comes to like cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, explain the difference for the average layperson that doesn't understand that.
Yeah. So the Iran certainly does seem to have quite a few more missiles in their inventory, and so these ones that are hitting the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, our airfields, for example, in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, and water distillation plants. I mean, those are ballistic missiles. Those have to go up into a trajectory and back down. So, somebody back in Iran plugs in a coordinate based off of Google Earth or whatever, and they collected these coordinates for these fixed targets a long time ago, and they go up to an apogee, and then they come back down and strike their target. They don't. By and large, some of the new ones, more advanced ones, do, but Iran is not likely to have any of these or many of these in any numbers. And so, anyway, these are in some ways kind of crude missiles. You remember the Scud missiles from the Iraq first Gulf War? That's what these are essentially. They're just newer equivalents of those. You have to know where they're going. They have to kill a.
That was the difficulty of the Scud, was that it was easily mounted on the back of a vehicle, and so finding these things wasn't as easy as a fixed launch site, right?
That's right. But there's no guidance for them, right? They're just following coordinates, and they're using physics to get to their location. And so because of that, we detect them not long after launch. Sometimes we detect them before launch for different reasons. And then, and then we can, if we have an asset available, and if we have, in this case, an Aegis ship, a cruiser, a destroyer, Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, we can very quickly, we have, computer, we can solve the physics, and we can send a missile up there to intercept it in flight. And so that's like, the ballistic missile defense that we hear about, that, that's essentially what those do. Now, a guided missile has some type of guidance systems. There's different types of guidance systems, but these anti-ship cruise missiles, to a great extent, have an active seeking radar. And so they have a little tiny radar in there that can look at, let's call it like 30 degrees in front of them, and it's scanning back and forth. So the operator shoots it off in a general direction. It may or may not have a couple waypoints that it goes to, but at the end of the day, it hits its target because it has a radar seeker head, and it sees a piece of metal, and it destroys that piece of metal.
Now, the interesting thing is, and I've read a lot about, our radar jamming capabilities, which are, just pretty phenomenal, I think, and have been used quite a bit in this war. Part of the reason we were so successful right off the bat, kind of getting past the air defenses, and in a way, their active, radar, when they turn that on, I'm learning it's very similar to, like, a sonar ping, right? Kind of gives away your position. So they are using their radar, and in a way, as soon as they turn it on, it tells us where they are, and we've had some pretty interesting capabilities to be able to project, basically, fake ships that are somewhere where they're not, and and be able to overwhelm their systems, and at the same time take them out because they've got it turned on. And so we can basically fire something that will take it right to where that is, where that signal is coming from. It just amazes me, the advances that we've made technologically. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are. Has there been do you think that this war shifts the equation into how we do war, and in particular, maybe the importance of certain pieces of equipment that we didn't see as important before, but certainly I think this war's proven, the necessity of, like, for example, our Navy. I mean, it's just the Navy has played a massive role, in that ability to be able to project power, right? We had a perfect example, and I know the U.S. has more aircraft carriers than any other country, and that's one of the things that we have that, like, Russia has way more tanks, right? But we got more aircraft carriers. When you think about that, and you think about what happened at the onset of this war, where you had, you had the UK denying us access to Diego Garcia, and you had other bases that we were not allowed to launch from. That creates a real problem for us, but it kind of doesn't either, because our aircraft carrier gives us the ability to get aircraft in, that we otherwise would not have been able to do had we not had access to some of those bases. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think there's a shift, amongst Joint Chiefs of Staff, and when they're looking at this going, wow, this was a very powerful tool for us?
Yeah. I mean, if of course I'm biased, but I'm trying to be objective. If you think about the United States Navy is the most critical military element in the world, period. I mean, 70% of the Earth's surface covered by water. We're surrounded by 2 oceans that can protect us. 90% of the world's trade is by water. Majority of that goes through 6 critical straits. Goes on, right? All these reasons why, and then there's, like, Alfred Thayer Mahan theory that, every naval officer learns this, but it's the world's divided into land powers, and conflicts divided into land powers and sea powers. Long story short, maritime nations and land nations, and maritime nations will always prevail. And so this explains, for example, the dominance of the United Kingdom over its European neighbors, including Germany, which has 100 miles of coastline, if that. And so, in response to that, or the Confederacy versus the Union, North versus South, right? The maritime tradition of the northern states, New England states versus the South, which was agrarian and didn't have a lot of maritime heritage and ports, and trade. And so these land powers, what they do is they end up innovating more to overcome their inherent weakness, that they don't have a connection to the water and they don't have that seafaring heritage, and which does prove to be dominant ultimately in warfare. And so, that's the South. If you think about it, during the Civil War, they came up with what they call the torpedo, which is a mine. They came up with the submarine. They came up with the ironclad ships. And you start to look at Germany and why the Germans are so innovative, especially with their war weapons, right? I mean, they came up with the jet. They came up with the rocket. They did all this stuff to overcome, their shortcoming of being essentially a land power. So anyway, yes. So hopefully our decision makers continue to see the importance of a robust Navy. Now, within the Navy, what's important, what's not? Well, air power has proven to be important. The ability to project power forward via carrier strike group and its air wing and everything that goes with that. But we are entering an era where that has limitations. We can talk about that maybe later, but there are limitations appearing to that, and that's in the age of these hypersonic missiles and controllable, steerable ballistic missiles, essentially, that go very fast and can defeat our defenses. We largely, as those come up, that's largely going to restrict our range of operation. Having an aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea in the theater is not the same, though, as having access to a basing like Diego Garcia, because Diego Garcia, as you know, gives us basing to B-52s and B-2s and B-1s, the heavy bombers, in addition to a safe place to put our refuelers and our early warning aircraft, etc. So, so naval power, as important as that is, doesn't replace the ability of strong allies and forward basing.
There's another kind of interesting thing that I've seen in this is there's been, I think it was in December actually, Trump announced plans for the development of a new class of surface combatant ships, basically battleships, which we haven't, nobody's seen since World War II. What is the have you read up any on that, on what these ships would look like, what their mission would be, how they would be used?
I've seen it. Since I've been involved in this profession, there's always some new vision for the next generation, and sometimes those come to pass and sometimes they don't. And so you don't get too tied up in the concepts. But we can look at what does and doesn't work. Certainly, the Arleigh Burke class destroyer has been an exceptionally successful platform.
Yeah.
We first destroyer platform we rebuilt from stern to stem, yes, stem to stern, and just model it. A wider beam and more stable platform, and took all the lessons from the previous classes, the Spruance class and the cruisers before that, Ticonderoga class cruisers, and then took all lessons, damage control lessons that we learned in the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Gulf, during the tanker wars when we lost Stark and Bridgeton. Well, we didn't lose Stark, we didn't lose Bridgeton, and we didn't lose Samuel B. Roberts, but they took heavy hits with casualties. And so we learned a lot of lessons from that. We learned a lot of lessons from the ships lost in the Falklands War, where the UK Navy, British Navy was supposed to be superior to the Argentinians, yet they get, to a great extent, they got their tail kicked. Mm-hmm. And so these Arleigh Burke class destroyers integrated all of that. And they're really just a super class. We have 70 some odd of these ships, horse of the fleet. And so, but there's a problem with them. They cost $2 billion plus to build. And, they draw 32 some odd feet, and, they're hard. they're hard to get into what we call the littoral or the coastal areas where a lot of these battles are going to be fought into the future, and they're limiting. In a war of attrition, to lose one or two Arleigh Burke class destroyers, high-end destroyers, very hard thing to do. In World War II, we had many destroyers, and we took many losses. If we have an adversary that's able to attrite one or two or three of our Arleigh Burke class destroyers, you might see a reluctance to even use them in the theater in the first place. And so through that, we've identified a need for many years for a lower end capability, maybe not as multi-mission and lower cost, but more quantity, lower draft type of ship that we can employ in the littorals, and that we can employ for like enforcing sanctions and coastal security, things of that nature. And so they've tried that a few times, and they've been largely unsuccessful.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, when the littoral ships were first kind of being built and put out there. I was in Japan, and I remember when they had one there, and it was like everybody joked that this ship was like a big waste of money, that they weren't ever gonna, it wasn't gonna find its its use and purpose. But it seems like it has found a purpose in this war. Am I correct in that?
Not really, unfortunately. It's not like they have no purpose, but they are not a popular ship, and they are largely regarded as a procurement mistake because the cost ran way up. They tried to make it a multi-mission platform that it has modules that can come in. It can be for example, mine sweeping platform, and so with the right modules on board. But the problem with that is it doesn't do anything that well. They've had a lot of problems with propulsion, etc. Okay. So these ships have been a little problematic, and I don't think they're certainly not making any more of them, and I don't think you're going to see them in the fleet much longer once they find some viable replacement.
Alternative,
yeah. Nate, there were something like.
But the concept of them being able to be in more shallow water, though, do you think that's going to be? We need that, right?
Absolutely. The concept's along the lines of what we were just talking about. It just so happens with this particular class that they've just had a lot of problems. They're going to continue to pursue this concept. I mean, it's widely known vulnerability. The United States is overly reliant on high technology, high end, very expensive, and as a result, then very few numbers of assets. And in wars of attrition, let's say we have a bunch of floating mines out there, and let's say we do take a few hits. $1,500 mine could take out a $2 billion Arleigh Burke destroyer. Who's winning that war, right? So, but they do. Our planners, they understand that, and they're going to be pursuing probably along the lines. The problem is with all this procurement stuff is it just gets complicated. They start off with a good idea, and then everybody puts their 2 cents in, and then you have a Frankenstein.
Well, I worked with the submarine fleet, and I was down at Washington Naval Yard doing cybersecurity on our federated weapons system. And I will tell you, the process of how they build these ships out, we called it a chart of many colors, because basically, they were constantly upgrading, but they have to do it in stages. And, it just was a very, very convoluted system. But, I don't know any other way that they could do it, because they have to keep these things in rotation. So,
yeah. Well, so to get to your answer your question more directly about like lessons learned and what capabilities, I kind of started big picture, like we need a Navy, and we need a well-trained, capable, well-funded, and a strong Navy. So within the Navy, though, what are we finding? Well, I mean, aircraft carriers still carry the day. Air power still rules. Our submarines, if they were needed for this conflict, you can bet that they're there. It's just that with one exception, they really haven't been used to our knowledge.
Yeah, to our knowledge. That's the key. We don't really know what all has been done, other than the one ship that they sunk near Sri Lanka, right? The Iranian ship that.
That's right. And personally, I think that they did. I mean, they could have destroyed that ship. I think it was a corvette or a frigate. They could have destroyed that ship Iranian ship by many other means. I think we chose to destroy it by submarine as a message to a certain adversary in
right.
South Asia.
I think you're 100%. I'm sure that went into the thinking on that, because that was like that, and that's this whole thing. I think is really, it is it's telling look at the response from Russia, look at the response from China. I don't know that anybody could have expected that. Look what's happening in Cuba right now.
Yeah,
I mean, it's very interesting. I think it was just yesterday, the Russian foreign minister basically got on there and told Iran, "Hey, you need to, you need to stop hostilities." And then China, the same thing. So it's clear that there has been a massive geopolitical shift as a result of, not only the Iran war, but also what happened in Venezuela. And let's not forget, the very first action taken by this new Trump administration was think about it. What was the very first thing that he had Marco Rubio do? He had him go down to Panama and he had him tell them to get the Chinese out of there. I mean, I think a lot of what we are seeing today, I think, is about China.
Yeah. I do too. I mean, we're all trying to guess, right? We're all trying to figure it out. And what I tend to reject is that, Trump is blackmailed. Trump is in Israel's back pocket. Trump, like that just oversimplifies the whole thing. And if you connect the dots all the way back, as you said, to Panama, and you connect the dots all the way now to the Strait of Hormuz and the Cargill and the oil and everything that's going on there, it does seem like there's some kind of strategic shift in the works here that maybe we need to give the benefit of the doubt. So it's been a little frustrating to me. I mean, there's a lot of propaganda, a lot of noise out there about this and about our Iranian action, and unfortunately, there's a lot of naysayers, on our side, right? Like, America first, type of influencers or, podcasters that I listen to and stuff. I respect their opinion still to this day, but I just think they're wrong. I mean, they're predicting in many cases the end of the world type of scenario to come from this. And I'm just here to say, I just don't see the evidence of it. No. And maybe we talk about that more, but I just don't see the evidence of that. And so maybe we do need to start to consider that there's a strategy afoot. For one. For two is missiles are still flying. So now is probably the time to just get behind the president, get behind the troops, get behind the mission, and we'll discuss and debate the merits of it in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have been I remember after Gulf War, I, like many other people, were very disenchanted with the whole concept of regime change and our constant, being involved in wars all over the place. And it's so much so that I ended up leaving the Republican Party at that time and became a card-carrying libertarian. That didn't last long. So once I realized that they were for open borders and that they were for abortion and that they were for they had a lot of other ideas that I didn't care for, I realized, okay, no, I'm still a Republican, still a conservative, but I had a view that was somewhat jaded, right? And this was while I was still working for the Defense Department, but everything has kind of shifted. I think seeing what happened during the Obama years, and in particular, he kind of went around, I think, on a big apology tour, right off the bat, and took a step back, really, instead of operating from a position of power, wanted to delegitimize the power that the United States has as a hegemonic force. And what that ended up doing was that invited, I think, aggression by Russia, by China. They basically ignored China's Belt and Road Initiative, which was essentially cover for them taking over all of the ports around the world, and indebting people to them, and even in our own backyard. So my view began to shift back towards, okay, maybe we don't need to be involved in propping up dictators around the world everywhere, but but maybe we still have a role, for, and I hate this term, but being the world's police, because if we're not out there and we are not projecting power, it creates a vacuum. And so the question is this, it seems like we are in a new era. I definitely think that there's a much bigger strategy at play here. And I think it largely involves China, and I think it involves kind of pulling Russia away from China. I think there's some of the things that I'm seeing, or at least indicating that's where Trump's going. But at the same time, I think Trump is, while he's flexing very hard, against the Chinese and showing them that they don't own, the world, and that we can stop them from getting oil, and we can interfere with their ability to have economic growth. At the same time, I think he's going, or he's either there or he's going there to Beijing to go have trade discussions with them. So it's fascinating because if you've ever read Trump's book, The Art of the Deal, I don't know if you've read it. I read it when he first got elected. I wanted to know, who is this guy? What is he all about? And I read that book, and I have seen very much what is in that book, played out in his presidencies, both of them, and even more so now than before. And he likes to negotiate from a position of power. He understands that as a businessman. He understands that as somebody who's been, quite successful, obviously. So I think the real challenge is going to be getting, while I think that a lot of his foreign policy, and I think Marco Rubio has been amazing as a Secretary of State. I mean, I'll be honest, I've been shocked. Like,
shocked.
I told, I didn't really like the guy. And when Trump picked him, and I'm like, really? But man, he has been amazing. And I think now, I'm actually looking at him going, man, I think I'd like to see him as the next president. And he has I think the right head on his shoulder to continue the kind of Don Roe doctrine, if you will, which I think is important. I think there has been, I think it's shown so far. It is shown to be a highly successful at shifting the geopolitics around the world to put us into a much better position of seeing peace around the world, and of course time will tell. The challenge that I see, though, to your point, is that we've got a lot of young people in this country that are highly misinformed, that are have been propagandized quite successfully by the enemy, and I think there's a lot of propaganda that is being pushed through our universities, through social media, and unlike the past, when we're seeing a new challenge, right? In the same respect, like we used to have the problem of the globalists having all the power, with the mainstream media, to be able to push their narrative, to basically be able to put us into forever wars and and all of that sort of thing. Globalization, they were controlling things in the past. I don't think that they what's happened is there's been a big major shift now to social media, and now you've got every Tom, Dick, and Harry that can like me, start their own show and present their ideas. But what we don't know is how much of what we see on a lot of the big popular podcasts, is actually being financed by our enemies. I mean, I got to wonder. Like, I look at what's happened with Tucker Carlson and his complete shift, and it's just like it's really shocking, just like how much he has shifted in his position. Or Candace Owens, and they have a lot of influence over people. But you're even seeing, you know, even Tim Pool, and I've been on his show, and I've seen, it's just so many interesting things where these people are not military experts, but they have a lot of influence. They're not geopolitics experts, but they're able to influence people in a very, powerful way. And I am not for restricting speech, but I do think that we need to assess the situation of how do we know that this influence is organic and how much of it is actually propaganda being funneled through various influencers. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, question everything. Former CO of mine when I was a young junior officer, trust no one, check everything, right? Trust no one, verify everything. And that's a good mantra for this time that we're in. Trust no one. You mentioned some there, and there's others that I just regard as very good. They're just good thinkers. I enjoy a good thinker. I'm not an intellectual giant myself, right? I need people to do the good thinking for me so that I can, sift through that and sift through their ideas, and then I'll figure out what I think is best, right? And that's how kind of I've sharpened my blade to be able to operate in this world. And so I rely on good thinkers, and I really appreciate that. But I have, this Holy Spirit's given me good discernment too, and I'm pretty good at sniffing out BS. And there is so much of that going on right now. You just mentioned a few very good thinkers that are completely off the mark, and I can name a half dozen off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Especially with respect to, just take the Israel issue, for example. It's so controversial because all of a sudden we can't have a discussion about Israel without all of a sudden it meaning anti-Semitism and Jews and blah, blah, blah. No, this is a geopolitical discussion. And, to what extent do we align ourselves with Israel's objectives and vice versa? And to what extent is that appropriate? These are always in bounds conversations, no matter what. It's just that people like to sling mud. But I've questioned. I'm like, how far do we want to follow Israel? And on the other hand, Israel is to a great extent is at least from a military standpoint. Israel to a great extent is doing the things it seems it needs to do.
Yeah, and it's in their backyard.
It's in their backyard.
Right.
That's exactly right. So it again, it's difficult. But then you go back to the Gaza stuff. Like, what the heck is going on in Gaza? But then how much of that is propaganda? I just don't know. I saw today where Glenn Beck had said, something like that out of the top 1,000 most viral posts about the Iran war, most of those came from overseas. It's just foreign influence to influence us on social media. We already know the education system at all levels up through college. And then we already know that the mainstream media is compromised. So, that leaves the so-called X and social media world that we think is free speech. Well, yeah, it's free speech, but I'll tell you what, it's laden with propaganda for the other side. And it's making this Iran war look like the end of the world. People are talking about global famine coming and billions of people dying and all this stuff. And I have a hard time intellectually understanding that. I just don't see the evidence, Nate.
Well, what's interesting is that on that note, it's fascinating to me because there's been a lot of talk in the past about, like, look at the climate change, and the whole world's going to end in 13 years. We're going to freeze over, or we're going to melt, or whatever. Like, we're going to have massive flooding all over the earth because the polar ice caps are going to melt. It is so ridiculous. And by the way, like, I always like to me, I kind of look at it like this, that there are things that just are, there's so many variables, it's impossible to know, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at somebody who is flying around the world in their private jet, pumping out a ton of carbon, going around lecturing people about they need to drive electric cars, which are still fueled by power plants, that are burning fossil. It's like so ridiculous. And then you get, Obama, talking about, we need to, protect the planet and have all this, green energy stuff. And, because we've got climate change coming, and it's going to, totally change the face of the earth, and we're going to have coastal flooding. And what does he do? He goes and buys a house in Martha's Vineyard. And it's like, come on, man.
Exactly. These
You know,
people aren't serious.
No.
They're not serious. And not only that, but none of their predictions have ever come true.
That's
Not
right.
one of their predictions, all the way back to into the 1990s. I mean, I don't know if you know that I'm an earth scientist. I'm a geologist, a hydrogeologist, a water scientist, right? And so I studied the climate and water and Earth's history extensively. I have a couple degrees in it, and that's what I do all day. I practice the scientific method, and I've never bought into the anthropogenic climate change. Does the climate change? Yes, it does. I mean, come on. Can we?
The easiest.
It's
like, I look at it like this. Look, I live in West Virginia. Okay, it gets freaking cold here in the winter, and it gets hot here in the summer. And what is the one thing that changes? Our, basically at the direction of the sun, and where we are on the planet. I mean, it's the sun is the most, it has the most impact on our climate more than anything. And the sun has its own solar cycles, and why they're not able to figure that out, which is some common sense, it blows my mind. But yeah, all of that. So that to the point of what we were just talking about, we see all of this tendency for people to be hyperbolic, with their, we're going to have famine, or we're going to have this or that. What they always fail to consider is our ability, our advancements in technology. I mean, look at what we've been able to do in terms of like agriculture, that we couldn't do 100 years ago. And that, that completely, it takes some of these threats off the board, because we do have the capability of growing food indoors under artificial light. We do have the capability of, genetically modifying plants. Now, I mean, granted, sometimes things can cause other problems, but we've been able to, create drought resistant plants and all kinds of crazy things. So it really is, I think our technological advancements and capabilities are always going to kind of set back, any of those fears of, these types of things. You have to take that into the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. The human element. I mean, God did not design this earth for us to just destroy ourselves by simply living. I mean, that's just whether or not you believe in God, like that just doesn't even make sense on a basic intellectual level.
Yeah.
There's a theory in economic geology that we're never going to run out of resources. We're never going to run out of gold, copper, lithium. We're never going to run out of oil. Why? Because as they become more scarce, then we'll become more innovative, and the technology will adapt to be able to exploit that. And the best example is, how many times have we reached peak oil? Okay, a million times. Seems like since I've been born, we've reached peak oil.
They were going to run out of it.
And then all of a sudden, remember in 2020, I remember sitting there watching the news, and they are paying, oil went negative. They are paying people to take oil because there's so much oil on the market, they needed some place to store it. And so not that oil wasn't at $120 a barrel, it was like -5 or -10 a barrel. People were getting paid to take oil. We have so much oil. I mean, right? Oh, yeah. Fracking and everything. U.S. became a net exporter of oil, and then, well, why did that change? Well, that changed for geopolitical, actually internal issues. But the point is, there's a glut, right? There's a glut of oil, and as oil starts to deplete, and maybe the internal combustion engine isn't going to be, the most effective means of propulsion into the future, fine, but something else will come around.
I'm looking forward to the day when I can have a little mini nuclear power plant in my backyard, and I can get off the grid entirely and just have, power for life.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'll say this: I've been, solar power, right? Like, aside from nuclear power, because of the handling and all that stuff, the most expensive form of power is solar power, right?
Yeah,
it's ridiculous, and it's on and it's off, and some days it's cloudy, and it's environmentally destructive, right? To build the solar panels and all that, batteries and that kind of stuff. So the green revolution is probably dead. Trump is helping to kill that. We're not going to, these large fields of solar panels, and those are going to go away. I remember we were living in Germany, And I remember there's going to be an eclipse, and the whole country was panicking because 30% at the time of its grid came from solar. Apparently, solar's everywhere. It's on the roofs of all the buildings and everything. And so they were all afraid of what the solar eclipse was going to do, and it never really came to that. But long story short, I think there's application for decentralized living, right? Like less reliant on a centralized grid. More resiliency for your home, more resiliency for your business because you have some solar capability. So I mean, that's a good thing. But don't compel us into this system because it doesn't work. Same thing with wind, right? Wind is almost equally as worthless.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because like here in West Virginia, we have a lot of coal, and the coal industry was really destroyed by the last administration, but we still got a lot of coal. And there are some plants like where they've been able to take coal and turn it into hydrogen and burn hydrogen, which burns clean. And I mean, it's amazing what they can do. And we got so much coal, like unbelievable amounts of it. And the nice thing about it is it's a stable form of energy. They literally can just dump it on the ground next to the power plant. And it doesn't gas, it doesn't, wash away, none of that. And so it's like I remember when I first moved here, I went down to the coal fields down in southern part of the state, and I remember thinking, oh man, how sad! Look at all this coal just laying here. I didn't realize, that's the way they store it. They just pile it up because they don't have to put it anywhere because it's not going anywhere.
Well, it's lasted a few million years, so
yeah
good to go. What's a few more?
You said you've alluded to a couple of times about your faith in God and everything, and I think that's an important part of this conversation too. One of the things that I really do think that there's a lot of planning that has gone into the actions that Trump has taken in his administration. I think he's got some great minds around him. I think he had 4 years to think about it, right? To think about what he wanted to do when he got back in the office, and I think he's been moving, with great effort to bring about, the changes that will, in fact, make America great again. But you hear people talk about, Trump's playing 5D chess and all of that, and I do think to a certain degree there is a lot of forethought to some of the actions that he has. But I have to say, I think that some of what we are seeing right now with these great successes is also divine. I think God's hand is clearly on him and on his presidency and on our nation right now and on Israel. I mean, look at what is happening. And I had an interesting, I had a guest on the other night, and I had to kind of, debate him on a little bit on the issue of Israel, because he was trying to right off the bat make it about replacement theology. And he was a believer in that. And I don't subscribe to that ideology or that theology. I think it's a false doctrine. But he was making the basis for not supporting Israel on the basis of that. And I'm like, whoa, hold on a minute. Regardless of whatever you think from a theological standpoint, you got to take a step back and realize that, like, Israel, since basically becoming, a nation again, in the 1940s, they have been attacked from all sides multiple times and have survived every single time. And in fact, not just survived, but won every single time. You can't tell me, that that's by accident, or that is, just purely, their military prowess. I think that God's hand is clearly on the nation of Israel. And the other thing too is that, there has been I think that, so I do think that we have to kind of understand and accept, especially if you are a believer, you got to understand that there's God's hand is going, he is the one that ultimately influences what happens in the world. If anybody's ever read the Bible and read through 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, it's all about that you see God raising up leaders and you see him bringing them down and raising them up and bringing them down on the basis of, their whether they're not, they're honoring him with what they're doing.
Yeah.
And
so when I was, go ahead, Nate. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, so I just think that that's an important part of this. And I think that I saw a post by Secretary Hegseth the other day, or it was by the Department of War, but it was so well done, and it was Pete Hegseth basically talking about God and talking about, I was moved by it. I thought it was very powerful, and thought it was really, something to see. And I'm glad to see a shift back towards humility and the recognition of our need, for the hand of providence, for God's hand in our success as a nation.
That's right. When I was in, grade school, I remember it was public school curriculum that the founding fathers were divinely inspired, that the Revolutionary War and the founding of this country was God's providence. Like, that was taught in public schools. I didn't learn that at church. I didn't, Sunday school. I didn't, I didn't really become a believer until, decades later. And the point is, that's not where it came. It came from the public school curriculum. It was commonly known. And if you look back at, all the miracles, the way everything came together, George Washington, it's clear, no different than it is, clear. You're correct. You can make a strong argument for Israel, and you can certainly make a strong argument for where we're at, with Trump's attempted assassination, and really, I'll tell you what, maybe the miracle of Joe Biden getting to go to the office, even though he didn't fairly win, but getting to go to the office another term, because that contrasted, right? It contrasted the evil versus the good. It's like, here's what you can have. You can have all this evil, or you can turn back. And absolutely, at the highest level, we can talk all we want about geopolitical and, operational level wars, down to the tactical level war, whatever. At the highest level, this is entirely spiritual battle between good and evil. I think it's intellectually small to brush that aside, your beliefs notwithstanding. And so here we are. And if you recognize and see that that's the foundation of everything occurring, then it helps explain things. And Israel is an ally. I mean, we can, and yes, there are reasons why we would want to support them from geopolitical, standpoint. Christians tend to want to support Israel for obvious reasons. People that will go to the ends of the earth for Israel, and try to, help them, bring up, help bring up about the second coming of Christ. I mean, like that, that gets silly, right? Like, let's just look at this from the standpoint that God is with us. He's always been present throughout the history of this country, and he's always been present throughout the history of the Israelis, going back 5,000 years. And we rise and we fall based on how closely we follow him. And that goes for us, and that goes for Israel. If they want to go off the reservation and do things, that are against God's will, then they'll pay for that. And likewise with us.
And I think that's a lot of what is going on right now with Iran. When I look at, and quite honestly, Venezuela too. I mean, you look at the kind of evil that has come out of both of those nations in the last, couple of decades. It has been the things that Iran has been doing, without a doubt. And when I, of course, I'm talking about the IRGC. That it has been a demonic regime that has been in control of that nation for 50 years. And this is why I'm seeing videos of people sitting on their rooftops in Iran, watching the bombs going off and celebrating and having a barbecue cookout on their roof. It is an interesting thing to see, but these people, they want freedom. And
I mean, it's an apocalyptic death cult, right? I mean, it's well known that that's what the mullahs and the Iranian regime, the Islamic
all the more reason why we should never allow them nuclear weapons, because they absolutely would use them.
Which is why we're there, right? I think there's more to it, by the way, but that's the stated purpose for why we're there, and nobody should be surprised, because this has come up. Iran's been 3 weeks away from completing a nuclear weapon for as long as I can remember, and we're finally taking action against that. But there's other reasons. Guess who controls the Strait of Hormuz right now? Guess who controls 20% of the world's oil flow? Guess who, right? And that can be for good, right? That's not like America the imperialist. No, that's like, if our mission is to, as you said earlier, we're going to help police the world for good, at least for our good and potentially for the good of other nations as well, then we've just scored a massive victory. And Iran is not going to control that strait.
That's right. That's right. 100% agree.
And really, I know we're running out of time, but just very quickly, just back to the strait issue.
Yeah. Let's
I mean, this toll booth, I mean, oil is flowing, ships are flowing. There's no mine. Well, there have not yet been any mines identified. Submarines are probably all sitting at the bottom of the ocean. I mean, the missile launchers are mostly all destroyed. Like, we're dealing with the nuisance threat with the drones. I know that's an issue, but we've been dealing with that with the Houthis in the Red Sea for 2 years, and nobody seemed to say anything about that.
Yeah, no, you're right. I'm really curious to see how this is gonna how the transition is going to happen, because there's no doubt about it that Reza Pahlavi has had a ongoing operation for some time to build a support within Iran. I think one of the differences this time around versus the last time there was a major uprising is it was very well coordinated this time. It happened all over the country. It didn't just happen in Tehran or in one area or another. They were all very well organized. And I know there's the Immortal Guard, which they have been I'm sure our CIA and Mossad have been arming and getting them ready. They've been giving them orders to stay inside, and the time's not yet, but eventually they're going to go out and they're going to take back their country. And I think it's going to be an amazing thing to see.
Yeah, I mean, come out wherever you are, right? Like that time's going to come. Once we degrade, first we had to degrade all the military capability. Now we're into, as far as we can assume. I've heard, by the way, that we struck 10,000 targets. So that means we are hitting IRGC sites. We are hitting probably secret police sites, and right, like we're making the conditions safe for the people to come out wherever you are, and then hopefully we start dropping pallets of M4s and they take control.
Yep.
No boots on ground for the U.S. Easy day.
Yeah. No, I think this is a new paradigm for warfare that but the conditions have to be right for that. I mean, look at in this case, everything seemed to align all at once for the right timing. I mean, even the fact that Russia has been in its own protracted war, up in the Ukraine, they've been in no position to really aid or assist their ally Iran. I think it has been a very interesting set of circumstances. Like I said, I think the hand of God has been on this whole operation, to create the right conditions. The people are organized, they're ready. You've got to where we aren't going to have to put boots on the ground to any major degree. We may have some, special forces guys that, do some operations, I would expect.
And potentially some Marines, right? Maybe perhaps secure Carg Island, whatever, right? Like that stuff is logical.
Yeah. But I don't foresee, Gulf War, 1 and 2, a replay of any of it. We learned a lot of lessons there. And that's another thing too, I think that's important, is that people got to understand that just because something was done in the past and things did not go well, doesn't mean that we don't learn from those experiences and put those lessons into, future operations. So I think that we have a very bright future. I'm also very hopeful with what's happening with Cuba. I mean, that's another one, man. Oh, could you imagine a free Cuba and them being able to economically support and sustain themselves?
It'd be phenomenal. I remember a few years back being with some very senior officers, naval officers, but and the Cuba uprising was occurring. This is, I don't know, probably 5 years ago. And, all I did was float the idea that, hey, what if we just drop them literally, like I just said, pallets of M4s in the countryside. And they looked at me like I was from another planet. I mean, like, why would you think that would make any difference? These are people that want to be free. They just need a push over the edge. And maybe we hear the lesson that we've learned from the past. Maybe we don't need to go in and rebuild them in our own image, right?
Yeah.
Jeffersonian democracy type of thing. Like maybe that's not going to work out. We've learned that lesson over the past few decades. So let them handle it, and it can't be any worse than it is.
Yeah, look what Iraq. We tried to force a federalized republic or whatever, and it's not turned out so well.
Right.
So it is it's an interesting time we're living in, and I'm actually very hopeful for the future. I don't.
I think there's reason to be. I think things are going to get tough. They're going to get harder before they get better, Nate. But they are going to get better.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. And as far as oil prices and gas prices going up, yeah, sure, we'll experience some of that. But man, I think a lot of what we're seeing in that regard, it's because of speculators. That's all. I mean, the reality is we don't have any shortage of oil on the Western Hemisphere. Quite the opposite. So all of this, this nonsense that we see happening in the market is because of people, getting jumpy. That's all it is.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. And some of it might be a little bit of engineered, right? Like there should be some engineered supply chain disruption, like we saw during the pandemic. I'm hearing how like Australia is running out of fuel, and I have a hard time buying that.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. Well, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. I do want to ask. I always like to ask my guests. We talked about a lot of different things, a lot of different topics, even within more than just warfare. But what do you want people to take away from our conversation?
Yeah. Well, for one, God is in control, right? Like this country was clearly founded by divine providence, and so the only way it can truly be restored is a return to God, and that battle takes place in your home county. This is, we have all this palace intrigue with Trump and Rubio and Hegseth and all this other stuff, but I'll tell you what, the real battle for freedom is right here in your backyard, in your county, at your city council meeting, at your health board meeting, at your school district meeting, etc. So, that would be my one. Two would be we need to get behind the president, get behind the troops, get behind the mission until the missiles stop flying, and then we can intellectualize this later.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good point. I always like to end the show in prayer. We can sit here and talk about things all we want, but at the end of the day, we need God's help. Our founders understood that, and I think they were wiser for it. That said, I usually lead that prayer, but Bill, would you like to close us out?
Sure, I can do that. Dear Lord, we thank you for this time together with Nate Cain and his guests that are watching. I mean, Lord, I humbly thank you for the opportunity to address Nate and his audience, because like Nate and the others, I'm just a regular guy who just wants to do your will and just wants to the best for this country and the best for his children. And we just ask for your continued hand on us as we go forward. Tell us what you want us to do, each of us in our respective communities. Give us a role. We will do your will, Lord. We thank you for this country and ask you to watch over our troops. In your name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And Bill, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you? Are you on social media?
No, I lurk on social media and gather intelligence, but I'm not there. You can't find me. So, info at americanlw.com. I have a environmental consulting firm, and my email goes to that, and I get that email. But otherwise, I'm kind of hard to find, Nate.
I envy you. I used to be that way. I used to for like most of my life, and then whistleblowing kind of threw that out.
Hard to find, hard to kill.
That is true. That is true. Well, with that, folks, I want to thank you for joining. I want to thank all of you that for watching the show. I think there's a lot of really great things that you can learn from people like Bill, and I want to thank you for supporting the show. Please remember to like and subscribe and share this with others. If you thought this content was good and people need to hear it, I think it would be worthy to send out to others. With that, stay safe, stay frosty, and good night.
Race some. Hey, hey, hey. Gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.